Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on my revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers, here's the thinking woman's bit of crumpet. A man whose humanitarian values and chivalry encourages us all to be better human beings, and he bears a passing resemblance to that spooky, anemic-looking WikiLeaks bloke. He's editor of the largest independent news site in New Zealand, Mr. Selwyn Manning. And the man anyone with an education above secondary school loves to loathe, fresh from his latest court case where the state wants to spank him for threatening to undermine the entire legal system as we know it, the Darth Vader of the right-wing blogosphere. Ladies and gentlemen, lock up your daughters. It's the unsuppressible Andrew Williams stalking Cameron Slater, aka Whale Oil from gotcha.co.nz. Nice to see you haven't been locked up yet. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1, the government have released their much anticipated alcohol policy, and apparently it's all the kids' fault. Issue 2, stopping natural dairy in New Zealand buying our farms, economic sovereignty or xenophobic hysteria right for Winston Peters. Issue 3 tonight, guess who's back? Back again. Heather Roy is back. Did anyone tell the member for Epsom? And we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off with issue 1. After spending so much political capital building the politically correct nanny state monster up in the minds of the simple and the frightened, National now can't enact any real social policy, hence this week's blame it all on the kids' alcohol changes. Gutless expediency or brilliant political masterstroke? Cameron, your mates in the National Party have simply done the math on this, haven't they? 130,000 18 to 19-year-olds may get pissed off about not being able to get as easily pissed, but National appeal to the rest of the electorate with a bit of teen bashing. It's a win-win, right?
I don't think Simon Power's smart enough to have done the math on that. I mean, to be perfectly blunt, everything he's touched so far has been a complete nightmare, and the booze issue is yet another debacle. I think National's completely missed the point on all this. Changing the laws and increasing penalties and muddling the waters over what age you can drink and what age you can't. I mean, for goodness sake, if you're 14 and you want to go to your neighbour's, your mate's place for a drink, you need a note from your parents. But if you're a girl and 14, you can get an abortion on demand pretty much without your parents knowing. You know, it doesn't work out.
What have they done wrong? What have they done wrong here?
Well, they've made an issue out of something that's not really an issue. I mean, where are the hordes of teenagers rampaging through the streets of the city with a booze problem? Is there really a booze problem, or have just a few people got upset?
Selwyn, these youth-focused booze changes are a joke, aren't they? Research found that 70% of New Zealanders' heavy drinkers are all over the age of 25. Did the government fold because of the massive pressure the booze barons put on them in the last 2 weeks before the announcement?
Oh yeah, possibly and probably quite likely, you know, in the sense that every MP that is in Parliament has a representation kind of thing going there with the business sector. We know, you know, that National is more kind of sympathetic perhaps to the arguments coming from that sector. But really National has really failed in this sense. It has failed to really address some of those areas relating to marketing that really stimulate that culture of booze drinking in New Zealand. That's where it's failed on this one.
Cam, you love the free market.
Absolutely.
You have a portrait of Ayn Rand that you kiss before you go to sleep each night. Should all restrictions be removed from booze so the powers of supply and demand can kill all the drunks, leaving sensible, moderate drinkers like John Key free to enjoy a healthy glass of nutritious alcoholic moderation?
Oh, you couldn't have said it better myself.
Right, what's the actual free market solution here?
Well, see, the talk about booze outlets, for instance, in Manukau. Len Brown's done this, and a number of Labour politicians are aghast at the number of booze outlets in Manukau. When you actually look at the numbers and do a comparison with, say, Manukau and Manurewa, which are said to be the worst, and compare those with Howick and Pakuranga, there's more booze outlets in Howick and Pakuranga than there are in Manurewa.
Do those areas have the same poverty issues, though?
Well, so is poverty the issue, or is booze outlets the issue?
Well, poverty exacerbates people.
Well, yeah, of course. If you're in poverty, you'd want to drink yourself into oblivion to take away the pain.
Who wouldn't, right?
So what we've got here, Simon Power taking away the drug of the masses.
Yeah.
But that's not fair, is it?
Well, why?
Well, but it's not going to solve poverty, is it?
But is it going to stop that 20 New Zealanders
No.
dying a week? It's not going to do a damn thing?
No, because if they want the booze, they'll go somewhere else and get it.
Well, yeah, exactly. Selwyn, gamblers, cops and defence staff are all exempt from all these changes. Should we make Simon Power's hypocrisy a double?
Well, all he has to do is to go down to his local liquor and get, a good whack of Woodstock, perhaps. But, really, once again, it comes back to failing to address the problem that they've been admitting they've got. In some way, central government, again, is failing to actually connect with the communities. And the biggest complaint, I suppose, coming from this is really it has targeted the youth. It hasn't targeted that 80 or 92% of the problem-heavy drinking that goes on in other aspects or other age groups of the New Zealand society. It really shows that its policy analysts are not doing the job. They're not actually looking at the impact of the policy, but they're not looking at the root causes either. No, I would suggest that it comes back to this culture of booze drinking that has been inherited by the young. And really, to actually start to solve it, it's got to actually look at the older age groups first.
And changing the law is not going to do that, though, is it? Changing the law is not going to change the thinking of a generation.
That's their argument, but I don't agree.
I don't agree either.
People who voted for this lot to actually get in there expect some movement on social issues, not just on greasing the wheels of commerce. And
I don't think they expected the wet liberalism of Simon Power, though.
The what did you describe it?
The wet liberalism of Simon Power.
Both of you, do either of you think this will really impact on the 20 New Zealanders who die from alcohol-related reasons each week?
Not a Zach. It won't do a thing.
No, it doesn't, and they've got to go and do a lot better than what they're doing, to be frank. A lot more thinking in their policy, a lot more progress on the policies that have an analysis of the cause and effect and actually address some solutions to that.
Okay, is this about them being so terrified of being seen as nanny state? Is that the reason why we've got such a piss week response here?
But what's your solution? You want a tougher response? What can you do? I mean, I would have thought being a liberal bomber, you would have wanted...
But there are, aren't they? You increase the price of alcohol, you lower the blood alcohol level to stop people
That's been stunningly spectacular with cigarettes, hasn't it?
Well, it has. It actually has,
No,
hasn't
it hasn't.
It's cut back the amount of people who are smoking.
No, it hasn't.
It has.
5 years ago, 700,000 people were smokers in New Zealand. The price of cigarettes has tripled, and guess how many smokers there are today? 700,000. Hasn't helped a single bit except increase revenue for the government, and that's what this is about.
It has stopped teenagers from picking up cigarettes, though. Yes, it has.
You're just not hanging around with enough teenagers,
The
Bomber.
research from Ash shows that. There are things they can do, aren't there?
Yeah, of course there are. One is starting to listen to the public. One is starting to actually look at those problems that exist in society instead of looking out of their mirror glass corporate kind of windows. And to start to actually identify really some of the things that are coming through from groups that know what they're on about. Nurses' organisation, for example, things like this that really can kind of feed into the political apparatus.
Than Geoffrey Palmer. I mean, this is where these came from. Geoffrey Palmer went out one night to Courtney Place and was shocked.
He's a good man, Geoffrey Palmer. He's trying to do good things. Let's hope he does quite well on the Gaza probe. What's the deal with supermarkets? Why are they not kicking them out of getting booze out of supermarkets? Because supermarkets can use these technically booze as a loss-leading product.
Well, for a start, I've never been in a supermarket where you can get the RTDs.
Yep.
Right. So most stuff in supermarkets that's sold is wine
and beer.
And beer. Kids don't drink wine. They just don't.
Yeah, but we're not aiming at the kids. We're aiming at the majority of everyone. We're not aiming at the kids.
You need to acquire a taste for wine. Right. I can remember when I started drinking. I was a beer drinker. Then I started off on white wine, then acquired the taste for red wine. It's simply not the case that kids go in there and say, oh, there's a bottle of $2 chuck, and we'll put that down the gullet.
But again, the big problem, I think, is, like on TV advertising, you've got your Karuba rum, for example, and it's all marketed for that youngest audience. It's a sweet drink. The palate is right for the younger.
That's the problem with RTDs, is they are sweet.
The government needs to start focusing on those things, and if there's going to be advertising for alcohol in this society, well, then it's got to actually be regulated in a way that is in the public's interest.
Well, RTDs, I think, is probably the biggest problem. They're all sweet, super sweet. You don't feel like you're drinking alcohol.
But we're still talking about...
You have 6 woodies or whatever, you're hammered.
But we're still
Absolutely
talking
hammered.
about kids. If we're talking about that wider alcohol culture that we've touched on, then getting booze out of supermarkets
But
would
changing
be a
the law won't
main
change
change.
intergenerational drinking
And
issues.
the other thing is it's not just a beer and wine drinking society
No.
now, like what you're talking about. The inherited kind of aspects of
Yes.
this booze drinking culture really needs to be addressed
People are
because
trying
it's
to
been
drink-
now marketed with powerful.
People are trying to drink RTDs with a beer drinking culture. There reaches a limit with beer where you can't drink anymore because you're spending more time in front of the urinal than you are actually drinking. It's not like that with RTDs.
And the evidence of it is a puke in the street.
Yes.
Well, indeed. Cam, who wins, who loses in this alcohol policy?
Well, I don't think Simon Powers won at all. He hyped this. He
Yep.
ramped it up. This was going to be the solution for all of our alcohol ills. And he's copped a flogging from left, right and centre. So I don't think he's made anyone happy.
Someone who wins, who loses?
Oh, I think that, really, it's an issue of time. There's been time wasting on this whole issue that goes back decades. And that's where the loss is. And finally having something that we've identified that we can actually move on, and it's wasted time again.
Thank you, panel. Issue 2, Natural Dairy New Zealand launched their Bill Ralston Retirement Fund last week, quickly followed by the Save Our Farms group. Is this economic sovereignty or xenophobic hysteria right for Winston Peters? Cam, how is this a case of the free market at work when large Chinese companies can gain access for 0% loans from the Communist Party and the Chinese don't allow foreigners to purchase land in China?
Well, the simple fact is that New Zealanders don't have a savings record, so we can't invest in our own land. People who own their own land, they're entitled to sell it to the highest bidder, whoever comes along.
Not in China.
Well, that's all right. Fine, that's in China. But are we going to have a state Communist Party running our country and all the other democratic
Well, according to
freedoms
you, we
taken
did
away?
last time, didn't we? Look, but isn't there an issue of, I can understand the free market saying, hey, look, you've got property rights, you can sell who you like, but if it's going to companies who have access to these huge loans like China does, that's a serious problem for us in the future,
Is
isn't
it?
it? Well, they've got all the money. They could continue to buy.
China has got all the money.
Yeah.
That's because of their business practices. There's nothing that we can do about that, but is it wrong for a private seller to want to take that money? In the case of the Crayford farms, the farms are broke.
Yeah.
The receiver has a duty, a fiduciary duty, to get the highest amount of return for the creditors.
Yeah.
So if the Chinese buyers of that are the highest bidder and they pass all the other investment criteria we have in New Zealand, there should be no issue. It shouldn't matter where they come from or how they
But
funded it.
they have access to all
So
of
what?
this cheap money. It gives them an unfair advantage above everybody else.
There's no such thing as fair. There isn't.
And if we continue to sell off that land, where does that lead us
Well,
to
what
the
we're
future?
talking about with the Crayford farms,
Yeah, it's a tiny percentage, I understand that, but it's
less
symbolic,
than
isn't it?
less than one half of 1%
Yep.
of all dairy land we're talking about.
But that's
we're
a spin coming out
But
of
we're
that
getting
crate.
bent out of shape about a very tiny amount. I mean, in the last 5 years, most of it under Labor,
Yep.
180,000 hectares
Yep.
were approved and sold.
But once
Right.
again, you're just parroting on the spin that's coming out.
It's
of
not
that group.
spin, it's fact. That's not spin.
No,
Those are
it's-
pure, cold, hard facts.
Fact can be spun, and it's been spun.
Sure, but what are they going to do? Are they going to dig up the land, roll it up and export it to China? No, it's not going anywhere. It's staying there.
Selwyn, $200,000 was donated to the National Party via a wealthy Chinese couple linked to Natural Dairy New Zealand. How does our political system deal with financial influence like that?
Well, there's an element of exposure, I suppose, if you look at it from a legal point of view, and that's why we know about this, otherwise we wouldn't. But the fact of the matter is, I think we need to really examine why that money would be invested in this National Party that's currently in government. It's not going anywhere else. It's obviously there as some sort of bung in the back pocket.
Just like union money for the Labor Party.
Well, that's another issue. We're looking at the National Party getting 200,000 here from one interested group.
The
Are they
EPM
buying policy? Are they
EPM
buying
UK
policy?
more than that to
Any
Labor.
reasonably minded person out there in your audience would know exactly why that money was invested into the National Party. The challenge for the National Party is how does it get away with it and still look credible?